Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Eric, a teacher with LSAT Demon, and joining me today, I am pleased to have Caleb, an LSAT Demon student who just crushed the LSAT and is now applying to law school with a LSAT score to be super proud of. And yeah, Caleb, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your journey with us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So tell me about when you started with LSAT Demon, or how long were you with LSAT Demon?
So I was with LSAT Demon for about 3 months. I was with another prep company for about a year. I didn't really get anywhere with them. So I switched to you guys in early June, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and never looked back. It was awesome. Hopefully I'll still be with you guys being an ask button helper.
Absolutely. It's a great opportunity to keep enjoying this test and having fun with the LSAT even after you're done. I've been doing the LSAT for 3 years after finishing the LSAT, so it's a treat. Yeah. So you were doing LSAT prep for a year elsewhere before joining, and that was while you were in undergrad, right? Was that a challenge to balance your study schedule for your classes with LSAT study?
So yeah, and this is where I would say I had a little bit of an unconventional start to my study.
Mm-hmm.
I started in summer of 2023 studying with another company. Thanks to one of my best friends, shout out Wade. He got me on the horse studying when he decided to go to law school. He wanted to go to law school, so he got me on this company with him. He told me I need to start studying, so I spent the summer studying. I did about a 2 hour intro that they had just to learn some basic, structures of arguments and things like that. Took my diagnostic, scored a 143. I was not happy with that at all. I thought I was a pretty good reader, and I'd never taken a test like the LSAT, so a bit distraught. But yeah, I studied all summer. I really wasn't making much progress. Kind of quit studying as I went back to school. That winter actually was when I signed up for the January 2024 LSAT. Again, I had no idea what I was getting into. My friend, told me to sign up with him, and he told me he would help me study over the break. So we sat down. There were many, many nights in my basement. He would come over, and we would take a prep test or, do some drilling, and it would just be him tutoring me basically because his scores were really, really good and mine were
Mm-hmm.
not. So I was scoring low 150s. I was really trying to master logic games because I heard that was where the most guaranteed points are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Took the January LSAT and got a 158, which I was ecstatic with. That was the best score I'd ever had at that point.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's a great amount of improvement. You definitely didn't set yourself up to get your best score right off the gate because you didn't give yourself a whole lot of time to prep. But even with sounded like maybe a couple months of prep, going from a 143 to a 158, that's awesome. But you weren't ready to quit.
right. Yeah, and that was with the logic games, which, that was by far my best section.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I thought that was where my journey had ended. I was, super happy with my score. I was looking at some law schools and the top 100. I was like, man, I can get accepted into some schools. I was ready to write that check, pay full price, and just go because I did it. And then, took some time off, kind of did some exploring on my own, and came to the conclusion that I needed to do a little bit more. I thought I could do a little bit more to get into a little bit better schools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's when I eventually found you guys this past summer. So never looked back. It was awesome. One of the best decisions I ever made was switching to you guys.
Yeah. So what changed when you started with LSAT Demon?
So I tried again with the old prep company in the summer, and the scores were the same. I wasn't really understanding the explanations at all. It was a lot of diagramming on even the most rudimentary logical reasoning questions. A lot of highlighting and reading the question first. I didn't really understand why I was doing any of it. So finally, I got so frustrated. I went to YouTube and I started searching, LSAT tips, all the gimmicks, the LSAT's three most common flaws and sufficient versus necessary assumptions and,
Mm-hmm.
if then clauses and things like that. and I came across this podcast. It was about an hour long. It turned out to be the Thinking LSAT podcast. Started listening to Ben and Nathan, and it all just made sense. It was none of this diagramming and kind of theoretical or arithmetic. It was a lot of just English. It just understand the words, take it one word at a time.
Hmm.
You can understand it. You don't have to do highlighting or diagramming.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's just about reading carefully.
hmm
Hmm.
Exactly. You don't need to do all the extra credit.
Yeah.
Um, I also really love that you guys don't really encourage people to pursue law school unless they know what they're getting into. I love that because I never heard that before. Um, so I love the idea that, it's hard and you have to really want it, and that made me want it even more. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, it just really changed my whole perspective. The philosophy that you guys have about the test is different from anybody else, and that really clicked with me. And so I'm really glad I was able to find you guys and see that.
Nice. Yeah, you're right that it is a lot simpler than many people make it out to be. It's just one word at a time, read carefully. You mentioned that when you started with that 143 diagnostic, you were disappointed by that, which you didn't have to be. 143 is a perfectly good diagnostic, good place to start. But nevertheless, you thought, well, I thought I was good at reading. So why have I not scored as well as I thought I would on this test that's about reading? Talk to me about that process. And did you discover that you weren't as good at reading as you thought? Or was it simply, oh no, I am good at reading, I just need to approach these questions in a different way? Some combination of the both? Like what changed about you as a reader as you studied this test?
I would say, and you guys have talked about this before, but I was a good high volume reader. If I was given a book report, I could read the book and I could write really well and turn in the paper. I grew up reading books, not so much anymore, but I'd always done well in English and things like that. So I thought that obviously that would translate to a test like the LSAT, where you have to be critical about your reading, and it's very concise, but it's also very dense, and you have to understand English at a high level. And I didn't at the time. I didn't know what it took to, I didn't understand the exact meaning of some words,
Mm.
and that took some figuring out. But yeah, just realizing that I needed to understand English a lot better at a really high level. That was probably the biggest change for me.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I've reflected on, because I took a lot of English classes, I always really liked studying English in school. The stuff that you read for English classes and for literature classes tends to be fairly well written. I mean, some of the literature that is held up as the greatest works of writing, like, yeah, you would hope that they're pretty well written. And a lot of the times that just means they're written clearly. The sentences are relatively easy to understand. That's a part of good writing. The LSAT is not always written well. On purpose, it's written in confusing ways many of the time. So just that might be new for people, the having to unpack a sentence that is not written clearly. I think that can take some practice too.
Yeah, yeah, and understanding, they're going to throw around some of the structure of whatever argument you're trying to read. They're going to put the conclusion first. And, if you get into studying, you're like, oh, it's going to be, whatever evidence or whatever the situation is, and it's going to be, the premise and then the conclusion. It's all going to be laid out. That's not how it's going to be. You need to, take the time to filter through that, understand what's, objective, what they're trying to argue for and why they're trying to argue for that.
Mm-hmm.
So taking the time to do that's important, and also just taking the time to or realizing what certain words mean. Many does not mean most, things like that. There are plenty of other words that I just can't think of at the moment. But
Sure. Yeah, or words, even a word like many. How many does that mean? Well, it depends on the context. Or few, or a few. There are little difference in nuances and meaning that really depend on context. They might have literal definitions, but a lot of it just comes down to, well, what's the context of what we're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. And those are things that a lot of people that even if you are really good at English, you don't really understand exactly what, those words mean and where they can be applied. So
Hmm.
understanding those also is a big step.
Totally. Yeah. So you mentioned you got that 158 and you were happy about that, excited for the prospect of squeaking into some solid school. And then you realized at some point in the summer, hey, I can actually do better than this. I'm going to get greedy. LSAT Demon's approach is making sense. So talk to me about where you went from that. What was the next, what was the growth from there? And what was the next official test that you took?
Yeah, it was just buying into the demon's philosophy. Everything that Ben and Nathan said, I applied that. Um, I would just all day. I had an internship, and all day I would play just video after video, podcast after podcast while I was working. And then at lunch, I would go and I would take a practice time section or do some drilling and try to apply what I just listened to. And eventually, things started clicking, and it was really, really nice to see. So yeah, started drilling that entire summer. I went to work, I would go home, I would drill, do time sections, do a practice test on the weekends. I drill for probably 2 or so hours on average, I would say. And that's all I did. I loved it. And I had so much fun doing it. And I would say that's a big part of studying too. You have to learn to love it, learn to love studying. So another part of my journey that I would say I wouldn't recommend to others. Given my circumstances, I think it was the only choice I really had. I wouldn't recommend it. It got kind of hairy at some points. Um, I had to apply this cycle. I think with my student loan situation from undergrad, I have to remain a full-time student to defer those. So I felt that it would be better for me to get the best score I can, go to law school, and not risk, having to graduate and pay off those loans and put it off for, 5, 10, or more years and maybe never get to pursue it. I thought
Mm.
that was a risk, and I didn't really want to take that risk. So I felt that I needed to apply this cycle. So I signed up for the August, September, and October LSATs. And I said, I'm going to do all these back to back to back, try to take as much pressure off of me as possible. My practice test scores were increasing, 2 to 3 points a week at that point. And I felt really good with what I was learning, and I was retaining a lot of what I was learning. So um, August came. I did it in person. I wanted to try in person. So I did it in person. I did it early in the morning. I usually study late at night. Um, would not recommend doing that. Stick to your study schedule if you can.
Hmm.
Took it in person. Uh, Felt pretty good. Thought I did decently well. And I got it back a couple weeks later, and I scored a 157. So was kind of taken aback. I didn't really know what to do. Panicked a little bit, but I stuck with it. Kept studying. In September, I also did it in person. I again in the morning. Didn't learn my lesson the first time. Took the test. Got a 159, and I was really frustrated at that point. My practice tests were in the mid 160s. Um, I thought I'd come a long way. I just didn't know why I wasn't performing.
Yeah. Do you have any idea why? I mean, you mentioned that the situation was different or the environment was different. You were taking it in person in the morning, so the environment of test day did not match your how you usually studied. Was there anything different about those test days where you underperformed that you can think of or that you can point to say, oh, this might be one reason why I didn't do as well as I could have?
I really don't know. I spent a while, wondering where I went wrong. And usually I'm a person where I don't really get that scared or anxious for tests. Obviously I was a little nervous.
Hmm.
But I felt fine. I felt like I did really well. But I do think there's some subconscious factors that go into that. I was pretty nervous. I went to bed extra early the night before. I woke up extra early, drank coffee. I never do that.
Ah, okay.
I tried to go eat a big breakfast, at Chick-fil-A and, sit in my car early and and sit outside the test center for the 20 or 30 minutes before it started to get in the right headspace. It was in person. I've never, been in that environment before. So I'm sure all those things played some sort of role. Um, and for my final test, I did it a little bit differently. And I think,
Yeah, what did you do differently for your final test?
the final test was really hectic, really, really hectic. I decided to do it online, because obviously the in-person stuff wasn't working. Um, Took it in October, and I I reached out to the testing accommodation center at my school and asked if there were any rooms or study rooms I could occupy for the test. And they're like, yeah, sure. Got my information. I told them it was for the LSAT, and they let me come in. So I went. This is probably 20 minutes before the test started. I put all my stuff away, got my computer, I followed them in, and it was like a normal test center, like a public test center. It was not an enclosed room. It
Ah,
was just a little cubicle with everybody else doing their test. And I was reading the guidelines for the LSAT online, and it was like you need to be in an enclosed room with no one else
in
and
your own room. Yep.
no technology, no windows, and that was couldn't be further from where I was at. So I ran to the instructor and I was like, "Hey, do you have any room I can go to that's just enclosed on my own? Do you have a janitor's closet?
A
I
broom
like,
closet, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I like, you don't understand. I need to do this." And they're like, "Well, we do, but we're not going to do that to you. That's inhumane." I was like, "You don't understand. I need to take this test."
Yeah.
So I spent about 15 minutes. They were calling all sorts of people, and there was nowhere for me to go. So I forget what time the test started. I think it started at 1 o'clock or so. It was 12:55, 5 minutes before, and I said, "Okay, I'm just gonna run home." I live with eight roommates, so they were all home. So I ran home, literally ran home, um, and ran into one of my roommates. He wasn't home. He had a or he had a room in the basement. So he only had one window. There was nothing really on the walls. I threw everything to the side that I could. I texted my roommates like, "Hey, I really need you guys to keep it down for the next, 2 hours or so, 2.5 hours."
Yeah.
Uh,
Stay quiet. Don't come into this room. Leave me alone.
Yeah, so I got on, I think a minute after 1 o'clock, and I, scrambled on and hopped on the site and started it. So would not recommend starting that way. It was
Uh-huh.
really hectic. But once I got there and I was able to settle down, I was able to just say, you know what, you've studied all this time, you know how to do it. Now's time to to see what you got. So
Yeah.
from there it was pretty smooth, but.
Yeah. Crazy story to get started and get the test rolling. But once you were in, was it like immediate? You were just locked in. Oh, yeah, this is just the same thing over. I can do this. This is the LSAT. I know how to do this.
Yeah, especially knowing it was my last attempt. There was a lot of knowing that there was a lot of finality with it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the stress was gone. I was like, either you know how to do it, and either you're going to succeed, you're going to do really well, or you're not. There's no need to stress about it because this is what it's going to be. You already have scores. So just read the question, do the test. And
Hmm.
I did that. I would say with that test, and I think everybody says this about every test administration, but the wording was a bit weird. It wasn't like the practice tests I've been taking. Some of the questions, some of the keywords or phrases you look for in the questions weren't there. They had kind of switched it around with other words. But I mean, again, you read it and you understand, what it's a synonym for, and you say, okay, this is the structure of it, and you just do it. And so yeah, it was really easy. I felt really good about it, knowing that it was the last one, and that showed up on the test score,
And that test score was.
168, which was really good, really good. It was not my highest practice test score, but it was good enough. I'm very content with that score.
And a big step up from what you had previously, and a huge step up from your diagnostic. So that's an awesome journey. Props to you for getting it done despite that crazy build up to that final test. That's wild, that runaround that you had to go through.
Yeah, I was it was not fun. I saw my entire legal career just fading in front of my eyes. As
Oh
I
my
was running
goodness.
back home. But
Oh my goodness.
yeah, and again, I wouldn't recommend that anyone do that. I'm a big believer in waiting a cycle. If I felt I could do that comfortably, I 100% would have. I'd scored um, you know, significantly higher on on a practice test or two.
Hmm.
And I, would have loved to wait another cycle and really flesh out all the things I was struggling with and apply with my best score with hardly any stress. So did I leave some points on the table, some money on the table? Yeah, but now that I have an offer in hand, and a scholarship with that, I know that I can go somewhere, and I am leagues away from where I would have been had I not joined you guys. So I'm extremely grateful.
And the offers that you have in hand are above and beyond what you would have expected a year ago when you were just happy with your 158 and thinking this would be good enough.
Absolutely. And I learned so much from the admissions and the application process as well from you guys. I mean, understanding, the game that's played, how to apply the things not to put in your application. I mean, I definitely became a much more concise writer,
Mm,
and learned to, read the room and not give them reasons to deny me. Short and sweet addendums. My GPA is subpar, so yeah, just kept it short and sweet. Gave them a ton of positives to look at. If there were negatives, I tried to show that I was improving those. Um, yeah, tried to make my personal statement as good as it can possibly be, and not make it too focused on just not too polarizing, trying to make it about how I'm a good applicant and I'll be a good lawyer one day. So yeah, I
nice.
learned so much more than just the LSAT from you guys.
Fantastic. Last thing I want to ask you about is your involvement in the LSAT Demon community. You were in the Discord, right?
Yeah, I was. I had a friend, and I know his Discord handle. We were friends for about a month. I can't remember his real name to save my life. I'm so sorry, but we did study together for about a month straight, and it was so much fun.
Yeah. What was useful about that community or about having that study buddy?
It was great because I think having someone to study with gives you the opportunity to, even for the questions that you get right, to explain why they're right to someone else. And just saying that out loud to yourself really, it makes you understand it so much more. And it helps you articulate why the question is right. There are a lot of questions where I know the answer is right, but I can't put it into words. It just, like, I think it's right. All the others just don't really make sense. But definitely studying with someone, being able to go through, okay, why is this right? Why is the other one wrong? That is, yeah, that was super beneficial, and I love that, and I love having the study rooms available. Matt was able to join in and help us that one night, and that was awesome. I would have never expected that. Um, that was great.
Yeah. Fantastic. Cool. Well, Caleb, thanks so much. It was great to meet you and to hear your story. Wild runarounds included, everything leading up to that final test. So, yeah, thanks so much for coming on and chatting. If you had to leave a final piece of advice for our listeners who are on their own LSAT journeys right now, what would it be?
Man, I would say first of all, I meant to say this in the beginning. I just want to thank the good Lord for putting me here. It took a lot of hard work to get where I am, but He blessed me with the talents and the abilities to get where I am, and He'll be the reason I am where I am. 5, 10 years down the road. So thank you, Jesus, for that. Um, some advice I would give is, again, learn to love the test. Pride yourself on your ability to read and understand English. I think that one part of the LSAT Demon that I loved was that you guys actively try to talk people out of going down this route, because it can be so detrimental to some people's careers if they don't really want to do law, if they just think they do and they don't really understand how hard it is and how miserable it can be. They can really dig themselves into a hole. But despite all the warnings you guys gave, all those warnings gave me more reason to do it. So I think that, if you think you want to go down this route, learn to love the LSAT, because law school is going to be that and so much more. And, your legal career is going to be that and so much more. So learn to love the LSAT, because you're going to be doing it a lot. find something that you like about it, and stick with that and pride yourself on that ability because it's really cool to have. So
Well said. Thanks, Caleb.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and keep us posted on the rest of your application cycle. Can't wait to hear what's next for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hope to get back to you guys with a an admission somewhere and a commitment to go. So
Cool. All right. Email daily at lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.